If I don't return in a few hours, you must take her and flee this place. For it would mean that I have failed, and they will be coming for you.
You've got these visions in your head, songs or story. You can create them yourself.
So, this is still not cheap to do. Stay tuned as we talk more about some of the advancements in AI when it comes to creating video. What does it do well? What does it not do so well? What does it look like when it gets two battling dragons coming together? How do we create consistent characters? And when is it better to be human? When is it better to actually take the inspiration that we get from AI and use that to create something for ourselves, something human-made? What is the impact on other creatives who are making video, who are doing these things manually? What is it going to mean for them with AI? How can they embrace that? How can they continue to have a job that they love doing, but they can still work with what they love to do, to be creative? We're going to look at this and many other things in this episode as we continue to uncover what is better with humans. In this episode, I talked with my friend Glen Boswell. Glen and I met early in the year in a course related to film and TV. Glen is a digital creative, has worked on numerous computer games and TV shows, and now runs the Astral Forge, a content production company that uses the latest AI advances to help businesses do more with what they have for less. He's also the author of Flight of Dragons, Wrath of the King. Glen, welcome.
Welcome.
So, Glen, I think I'm excited about this conversation. I feel like there's a lot of great things that we can be talking about. And firstly, give us a bit of a background on your time working in TV and computer games.
So when I was at school, all I ever wanted to do really was to make computer games. And I'm talking back when we're looking at sort of Pixel, Lemmings, that kind of era in the original Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Mega Drive. And I came out of school and went to college, but back then there wasn't really any college courses that dealt with the creation of computer games. So a lot of it was kind of teaching myself from home and trying to get hold of the packages that I needed. So D-Paint, and then moving on to 3D Studio after that. And I came out of college and created my own sort of 30-minute cartoon and used that to go to interviews. And my first job was working on a Thomas the Tank Engine title. And alongside that was Noddy and Starsky and Hutch, which was a fantastic time to be working on those games.
Wow. Oh, yes. It's when we had this discussion earlier about about talking about the TV and games, it's like nothing amazing, but actually there's some special shows there. I mean, we've all, maybe not so much now, but a lot of people are growing up with Noddy, and my mum had this habit of, what's her habit, but she would like to buy me the compendium of something, so to read to my two daughters when they were young. So I had the compendium of Thomas Tank Engine, compendium of Winnie the Pooh. So I read all of those stories.
Yeah,
and I've played the Starsky and Hutch game as well. So that's.
Did you read? Oh, okay, yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, we nearly made a follow up, but the follow up never came to fruition. But I went on to there and multiple sort of games companies, and then into the TV industry where I worked on Captain Scarlet at Pinewood Studios. We did 2 series of that, and the industry's changed so much because when I first started, there wasn't any kind of 3D art as such until really sort of Toy Story came out, and then it changed everything. And the way that I sort of look at AI now is just an evolution. It's an evolution of technology that's always been there. An example of that, I was speaking to a chap the other day, and they were talking about AI taking over everything. And I said, well, when you think back to when you're lighting a scene in 3D Studio, you put a sphere into the screen, into the scene, and then you put your light source in there. When you move that light around that sphere, you see the light moving around the sphere in real time. And the reason why it's doing that is because it's basic AI. It's always been AI. And now we're just looking at an evolution of that technology. So yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, it's interesting. We can talk about this a bit later on, and it's something that's particularly close to my heart, as well as helping to change the narrative a little bit in terms of how we look at AI and how we approach it. And look at it as something that that can actually enable us to do more rather than actually do less. And it's about how we use it, right? If we use it in a way to replace people, it will replace people. We don't have to use it in that way. A better way to do it is to use it to actually grow and learn more. Have AI do the tasks that really are not really that valuable to us, like you just described. If we go back to a time when you had software that, to get the light, you'd have to maybe move the light, then you'd have to determine how intense. You have to do all these things manually. And I think, and you can argue, well, okay, yes, that there's value in that when you couldn't do it any other way. But if the value is in being able to create this creative piece, then you want to have all the tools, don't you? If you're an artist and you've only got 5 paints, you paint with the 5 paints. But if you've got a palette of 10, you're going to want to use the palette of 10 because the ultimate thing is the creative output.
That's correct. Yeah. And I mean, a perfect example is, I think a lot of people look at a game environment at the moment where you've got trees across the environment, you've got a river flowing through the middle, you've got the correct pebbles underneath the water, and you've got little soft areas where maybe an animal's crossed. It looks fantastic, but I think a lot of people think that an artist has actually gone in and manually placed all those trees and placed all of those rocks and the various areas, but they haven't. It's all done by sliders. How many trees do you want? Where you just do up and down the slider. You can specify where you don't want trees, and it will vary them as well. So it'll vary the branches and the leaf density and the height so that they look different to each other. And AI is basically an extension of what's been going on for years and years. And I think it's scary because a lot of people in the industry are fearful of it, and it's affected me. It's affected my colleagues. But you need to embrace it and use it as a tool. And the way that I do it is hopefully the right way, if there is a right way.
Yeah. And it reminds me of, as you're saying, it's been around for a long time. And we think about computer games. I mean, you mentioned about, the first sort of bit of coding I ever did was on a ZX Spectrum 48K.
Yeah.
And it was copying code out of a magazine. And even then, I'd play a game. There's a game, I think it was called Match Day, a football game. And that was using some, it was fairly primitive, but it was using some form of artificial intelligence. And we found that a lot with the games back then, because what we would find was you'd find the patterns, right? A lot of the old sort of arcade Atari games, there was patterns because it was limited in terms of what it could do, but it was still using a form of artificial intelligence. And the people that we mentioned earlier on, Grand Theft Auto, is actually Grand Theft Auto. All these games that we play, that they're all using, that there is some form of the game interacting with us in some way, and not necessarily a predictive pattern, is using some form of AI, or like you say, it's also been used AI to generate it. And I think that the biggest challenge, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, is this, as you've mentioned, so it's the speed of change. When we've seen things change before, we've had a chance to go, okay, this new thing's come out, that's going to change things for me. Well, it's a way off. I've got time to train. I've got time to go and do more things. But actually, what we're finding now is there isn't necessarily the time. Well, there is time, but we're having to sort of chase up. We're having to actually be much more quicker in terms of doing that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, AI speeds up the output vastly, and it's one of the things that we can use these new tools, or we can be fearful of them and put our head in the sand and not use them. But they're here, and they're getting stronger and stronger over a very short period of time. If we're looking at video as an example, I would say maybe 12 months ago, you had struggled to get somebody to walk in a straight line. And now you can essentially put a storyboard in, put your characters in, and you can get that to follow that for 15 seconds of footage with camera cuts. effects, sound, and it's just it's a vast improvement.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you mentioned there is the getting the character walking a straight line. And again, something else, we talk about the advancements that we've also come to the point where we can get some character consistency. I know I played around with this probably over 12 months ago now, just in using something like ChatGPT and trying to get it to reproduce a character, a picture of a cartoon character in different poses, but actually in a consistent way. And what I found was there were similarities, but every time there was something that wasn't quite right. So what does that process look like? How do you make sure that you get this consistency in your characters?
So I've got a little example here that I could actually show you. So from an area that I've been working on, if I just go to share this, a character sheet will essentially have all of your character details on it. So this is, for example, this is a Bright, he's a warlock, he's a bad guy. You'll usually have different angles of the face and standard pose. So that helps the AI to work out if you've got, for example, shots from behind the character. Any specific items that they would usually be carrying around, you would include these into the character sheet along with your palette of colors. Any other little accessories that they might have on their belt. Their height, their kind of attitude, the way that they might walk, etc., etc. And then you would then be able to use that to create a scene. So this is just a very, very short shot. This is the same character.
Ride the dragon! Master it!
So there we've got full emotion. We've got them in a scene that's got the rain throwing it down onto the character. You can get a really nice sort of sense of what's going on there. There's different ways of doing this. So what you can do, if, for example, with an environment, if we look at this one here, this is a forest environment, an elven kind of forest you've got the magical creatures that you might see in that forest. You've got sort of the styles of the trees. You've got a description about the trees. They're very specific to the story. So they're the Noddy trees. And then you've obviously got some ancient ruins in various areas throughout that woodland. If you run that into the system along with your characters and what you want to see, this is. So there you've got a really nice natural walk through your environment. You've got, I'll just sort of scroll back a little bit. There you got your dragon walking with your two characters. They're adhering to the surface on the ground, the lighting striking them in the right area. The dragon's got real weight to his movements. So if you look as his claw comes down here, he spreads his claw out, puts the weight down. This kind of thing is, even here, as he comes across here with his other claw, he pulls the claw up to avoid the root, as you can see that.
Yeah. Wow.
It's
just mental.
Yeah, and it's this kind of thing that would have taken animators a long, long time to get through. Now there are, if I show you this one, so this is a burning village. The village has been attacked by dragons, and our main character, who's a friendly dragon, goes into the village to try to rescue people. So I did a small storyboard made with ChatGPT and then just tweaked afterwards. And this is a test shot from that particular scene.
The traitor. He's here.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it? I think, and I think it's such a brilliant representation of, in terms of getting the most out of AI, is preparation.
Yeah,
and we see it so often. You put a one-line prompt in, or maybe even a sentence. You might get something, and you probably get something relatively good, but is it really what you wanted? And often we can see people get the frustration with how to do that. And of course, you've really shown a great example there of there's multiple layers in that. There's actually you generating a storyboard of the scenes, describing what you what is actually going on there. And you're doing the same thing with the character sheets. So there is a reference for the AI to be able to continuously pull that from. And that's, it's an amazing scene. So what is the inspiration behind this? What is you're creating these videos with these dragons. What is the...
Yeah, well, this particular video is me actually trying to create a series or a film from my book, trying to sort of visualize it. And when I first saw the dragon, Dracarim, and Nealandra, who's the elf that saves him earlier on the story, on the screen and actually reacting with each other, it's quite an emotional moment, because there was a lot of work that went into getting Nealandra to look correct and Dracarim to look right, and then putting them in the scene and actually seeing them animate. It's a feeling that it's strange. And this is a whole new kind of medium for people to present their ideas. And there's a lot of creative out there that for years wouldn't have had that option.
Yeah.
And now they have. If you've got these visions in your head, songs or stories, or, just short stories, scenes, you can actually go now and you can create them yourself. If you just learn the methods and put the time in, you can get them to look fantastic. There's various options out there. So you've got Kling, which is great at the moment. That's a fantastic animation package. You've got CDance 2.0, which is quite controversial, but it's expensive to use, but it's really, really good for particularly combat scenes. So do you want to see a little combat scene?
Yeah, just before we jump into that, what you mentioned about CDance, CDance being controversial. What is controversial?
So when they first showed the examples of CDance, they had literally Tom Cruise fighting against, I can't remember who it was now. But Tom Cruise was basically there having a fight, and it looked superb and it was fantastic. And there were more and more of these videos coming out. And then really they had to reel it in because it was too powerful. So now when you use CDance, particularly in the UK, if you try to upload a face, it could be your face or my face, any face, it won't let you do the footage. So there's various ways that people are working around that at the moment, but I think it's kind of like trying to find the balance where you're not encroaching on the full likeness of known actors and people that do it for a living, or encroaching on copyrights. You have to get the right level, and they're trying to find that right now.
But the thing is, the aim is, isn't it, that you want creatives to be able to be creative. You want those that their living is around being creative to continue to make a living from that, continue to, what's the ultimate aim for a lot of people is to do a job you love. And if you're in that space, you want to continue to do that. And yet there's also that element of, you've spoken about as well, how without being able to get the funding, I remember many years ago, I don't think the film ever happened, but I remember being approached about, it was an early crowdfunding days, and about his film. I think it might have been Jason Donovan was going to star in it or something, but it was never happened. Because, as much as I didn't part with any money, but they were wanting to raise these funds, and it never happened. And when we look at what you've been able to do already, then it's like, wow, that's incredible to bring your vision to life. And you shared that, the emotion of seeing that, of seeing something that you have envisaged, that I'm sure you have dreamt, I'm sure you have visualized these characters coming together and being able to see that. It's something, like you say, you may never, ever kind of see. So I think that's an incredible blessing as well. And but like you mentioned, that the balance is the balance. It's kind of going, we shouldn't use AI to not pay people to do stuff. If we have the opportunity to be paying people to do stuff, let's pay them for what we need them to do. But we don't need to pay them for the things that really they don't need to be doing. It's the creative piece, right? For example, you've come up with the story, you've come up with these ideas, and you're basically outputting that creativity and using AI to build you, to visualize that for you. But you still had to come up with a story. You still had to figure out how it was all going to pan out. How were you going to, and you still are. That this is the thing I kind of term recently. I call it ACE, and it's this approach to AI where we say, okay, we need the human to be asking, the human prompts, the human makes the request, and then the C is the AI creates it. The AI creates something, and then we have the evaluation. So as a end user, we'll evaluate it and we'll say, okay, we're going to evaluate, and now we're going to feed back, and we're going to continue that loop until we end up with what we want. And then I had one other thing onto that, which is D, that we aced it to say, well, actually the D is the develop, because the D is where we take all these learnings. So the next time we go and do the ask again, or a different ask, then we're more prepared with that. So we can actually have this growth that we're growing with AI, as opposed to either ignoring it or actually using it in a very inefficient way, which is not great for sustainability. But also it's not great for anyone if we're using it for things that we could and are better off using a human to do.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, well, the examples are getting stronger and stronger of the change that we're looking at here. It is hard because there is a lot of kickback from various areas against AI, and rightly so, in a lot of ways. But also, it is. I'll show you something else very quickly. So this is different from animation. This is I started out working with AI through Midjourney, and what I did there was portraits. So I wanted to do portraits for my characters, but also for customers, particularly people that like D&D. So if you like Dungeons and Dragons, then this is for you. So basically, I wanted to be able to visualize their character, all the little details that they have, and there's loads of little bits and bobs and details in a Dungeons and Dragons character, a scar in the right place, a little item in the right pocket, all sorts. And I wanted to be able to do that at a decent price where, it wouldn't take me months and months to do it. So let me just show you this quickly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this, actually. You now got me thinking maybe I should create a character sheet for my old D&D character, Maloki, who was half elf sorcerer.
So a perfect example is this character right here. So hopefully you can see her. So the customer wanted to have, she described the character to me, sort of a sassy type bard, rogue sort of character, and they wanted to have them gambling in a casino. So I put the kind of the description that I had and everything else into Midjourney, and each one that you get out, it's okay. You could essentially you could use that if you wanted to as a. But these items here, they make no sense whatsoever. Her hands here make no sense. The cards, if you look at them, are complete gibberish. Then run through to the next one. Same thing. That it's not right, and if you zoom in, you can tell it's AI. You can just see that from the way that the image is structured. So what I would then do is say, well, I like how she's posed. I like the character there. I kind of like the environment. So I then take that, and this is my final painting, and this is all done by hand. So if you zoom in, you can see these are hand strokes. This is me painting.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So that is the final result that you get out of it, and you can use that in multiple ways. Another one would be this character here. So this is what they provided me with, was like a little sketch of how they wanted the character to look. They sent me over an image of the weapon. So that's her weapon that she uses. Putting that through into, into I think this was actually Gemini, and this is what Gemini came out with, which is okay. Once again, it's a decent image, but it's not personal. It's not got, you're missing out on a lot there. So I just restructured it and painted it, and as you can see, look, this is all hand painted, but it's using the AI to kind of, okay, there's a pose there. I've got an idea of how I want to do this.
Yeah, that's a great example. Actually a great example of, again, that thing of inspiration. In episode 5, in the Best with Humans podcast, a conversation with a screenwriter, and he's using AI to create a tool to help inspire screenwriters, to help them improve their screenwriting, not to do the screenwriting for them. And it's a great example of where we can go, well, maybe we can do something and get that extra inspiration that allows us to do that, to grow. Right? This is the thing, isn't it? What we want to grow. Nobody wants to stagnate. Nobody wants to have AI do everything for them and just, put their feet up and, just drink pina coladas all day, right? At the beach, right? People might say that, but they're going to get bored after a little while. It's nice to go for a week or two on a holiday, isn't it? But you don't want to go for a permanent holiday, and people will then get restless. And we want to grow and be creative. We're born to create. We were created to create. And so that's a great example. And I do want to honor those listening that probably were thinking about, oh yeah, you just described CoDance and we didn't actually look at that. But if you could just show us what you did with that briefly as well, would be I think would be cool. Just so there's not some people that are going, oh, you never showed us that thing.
What was that? Sorry,
was it CoDance? Was that what you?
CDance.
CDance. Sorry, yeah.
What CDance is really good at is it's good at combat. So the dragon scene, for example, that was through CDance 2.0. So because it doesn't seem to be afraid of actually throwing the characters against each other and having conflict between them, whereas other AIs tend to struggle with that. So if I sort of share this one here, this is an orc fight test that I ran through, and I'll take you through it. Now, a lot of that is fantastic, right? So if we go through slowly, we have the block here where she actually twists her arm back to hold off the attack. Then we actually get a wound on the orc, which is, you get a bit of blood spray. You get the reaction. She looks satisfied with the attack.
Yeah.
And then she brings it out. We get a bit of spray as she pulls the sword back out again. Now, she turns around. She's aware of this person behind her, and it looks like this is going to work out well to start with. But this is where CDance went a bit wonky. So the orc could have swung around with its sword straight into the character, but instead he switches it and it goes from the other side. And she takes her eye off of him and goes back to the other the other orc, which is a strange thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But then she follows it up with what is actually quite a good move, which is she docks, spins backwards to give herself space, and then eventually releases the spell, which the spell looks great, but I would like to have seen more impact in the spell there.
Yeah.
And then here finally she brings her sword up and she blocks this attack here, which looks great to start with, but if you look in sort of 2 frames time, her sword's now on the opposite side.
Oh yeah.
So what you'd probably need to do here is you can either individually paint the frames or do a cut to a different shot. There's all sorts of tricks that you can get away with to adjust that. And this is another CDance. So again, from this point here, I think this is fantastic because you've got this real kind of look in his face that he wants to deliver the blow. And then obviously you've got the blow impacting on the orc, and again you've got all the results of that. But this is what interests me about this particular shot. If you look at the belt around the waist of the orc, as he goes forward from the impact, the belt loosens. So the weight of the belt is coming forward, which you wouldn't normally see. If someone was animating that, you'd probably just have the belt near enough attached to the orc there.
Yeah.
And there's real kind of weight and impact that you can get from an AI sequence that you might not even get particularly out of some of the better animators in the industry, which is crazy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think this is just such a rich episode because people are really able to see some of this, what is achievable, but also some of the challenges, right? You're not saying this is simple. And also one of the things you briefly touched upon was cost.
Yeah.
So this is still not cheap to do. So we're not talking sort of £20 a month, subscription wise, are we on this? This is a little bit more cost to these.
Yeah, especially for something like I said earlier, CDance, it's expensive. I don't know if it's going to. I can't work out myself. I don't know if you would have a view on this, but whether that's going to get cheaper over time or more expensive as it becomes more advanced. I'd like to think cheaper.
Well, I think there's a number of factors that are going to come into play. One is so many of these AI organizations are relying on funding, and at some point stakeholders are going to want money back. So they're going to have some plan of, well, how do we actually make money from these things? Now, I think maybe one thing will depend upon how much uptake is there in terms of in the film and TV industry and for some of these types of applications, because you say if they can make their money through the higher end space, then maybe it does become cheaper. I think there's also going to be potential legislation around sustainability use of AI. So our organization is going to have to start to report on I think that will happen. I think it'll still be a few years away, but I think that's something else that is going to have an impact and make it more expensive. As I mentioned briefly earlier, that we've got Claude who've just brought out their latest model, Fable 5, in the last couple of days. And that's free until June the 22nd. And then it's going to be an extra cost for that. So we're starting to see these companies wanting to squeeze a little bit more money out of us as well. So I think it's likely to get more expensive, I think, over time. So I think in some respects, if you want to try some of these things out, I think my recommendation to people is do what you can with it now. And if we think about, when I talk about the ACE acronym, we ultimately want to not just use AI and develop from that, but we want to be developing things that require us to use AI less. So I'm using it to develop code and to create some tools that I can use that don't use AI. So where I know I want a predictable result and I can do that, it doesn't need some intelligence. It doesn't need much any thinking other than some basic options. But where I can build those things, and it means I can be rerunning these applications that I'm building, and the cost is my own, either the hosting or the local power, as opposed to using AI. So that's the other thing is, I would say, use AI where you can to build what you can. But if you can use it to replicate the things that you're doing in a predictable way, then in terms of building a tool to do that without using AI, I think that's also an interesting thing to look at, as well as using open source tools as well that you can run on your computer, because then at least you know how much power you're using. You're kind of almost limited to what you're using. Whereas when you throw something up, I mean, to be honest, I have no idea. I mean, Fable 5 is their most powerful model, and it's the fastest one they've done so far. So I have no idea what sort of what that's doing in terms of, and I haven't even looked at the size of the model, but I mean, I imagine it's huge.
No,
so,
I need to look into Fable 5, I think.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be the challenge. I think, unfortunately, it is going to get more expensive. And the thing that I talking to businesses about is actually making sure, again, this principle of sustainable AI to me is using it in using the minimum way you can. So if you can use a lower model, use the lower model. Use the more advanced stuff when you need to use it. But again, if you can build things out of it, a bit like what you've done, where you've used it for inspiration and then you've drawn. So there's an output that's been created with the AI and the human together. And so therefore then you can use the output on an ongoing basis. The danger is if we become too reliant upon it, we build all our processes around using AI, and then these stakeholders or these AI companies want some return on their investment.
Yeah,
the price shoots up, and we're all stuck there with, well, okay, as businesses particularly, that we are now reliant on our cost base is shooting up because we've sat on that. So as much as I'm an advocate of AI, I'm also on the other side of it, an advocate of humans and wanting to make sure that we do things that are sustainable, not just for the environment, for ourselves as well.
And an interesting fact for you as well. I don't know if you remember when we were on the S2 course together, when I looked into it, the cost of a traditional TV series compared to the cost of specifically doing it all in AI is cheaper, but the impact on the environment through using AI for an entire series is way less than the traditional methods, which is crazy. We all know that AI is obviously using up a lot of resources, and it's individually it's not got a good impact on the environment. But if you look across the whole of a series or a film, the film industry is doing far more harm with traditional methods than AI would do, which is crazy.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, that that's a really good observation, because it does so much depend on what you're using it for. So what is the alternative? As you say, the initiatives they use within film and TV, Albert, where they have to report the sustainability. The reason it's in that industry, isn't it, is because of the fact that they know there's an issue. So they know there's an issue to do that, and addressing that with making more local productions, not having to travel so much, and all those different elements. But as you say, we shouldn't just assume that, take the line of AI is less sustainable. It does depend on what we're doing. If I'm sitting here and I'm going, I want to search out some information just about, I don't know, what movies are coming up in 2026 or 2027. And I go, right, I'm going to use Fable 5 and I'm going to type that prompt in. That is a waste of resources.
Overkill.
I could probably do it in one of the lower models like Haiku even, or Sonnet. So, and for those that don't know what we're talking about, the different models within all the different AI large language models like ChatGPT, like Claude and Gemini, have different levels you can choose. And you can also, in Claude, you can choose the model and the effort they will use. So like low, medium, high, for example. So Haiku is a small model, use less resources. Then there's Sonnet, then there's Opus, and now we've got Fable 5, and they'll keep on building other ones as well. But we can reduce, if we find the minimum model we can use, or the minimum effort that we can set our AI tools to achieve the result we want, then obviously that is going to make it more effective. But I think that is a great insight, and we shouldn't just assume, one, that AI doesn't cost anything because it's easy for us to just type it in. It's only costing us £20 a month or whatever. On the other hand, we also shouldn't assume that it's always going to be less sustainable than the alternatives, because it's going to depend on the situation.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think it's been an excellent, and I'm looking forward to the to when this one comes out, because I think you brought some real value in being able to see some real things in action, and also just you've been able to describe the processes, as an artist, as a 3D animator, to walk us through and to notice those things that we wouldn't necessarily notice. We wouldn't notice the belts moving. I mean, would we even might necessarily notice the swords on the wrong side? Might notice the fact that the warrior turns away from the sun. I mean, I think anybody would think that's a normal thing. You're going to turn away. However, but that's the thing, isn't it? I think, as human beings, we're using AI. Again, this principle of evaluation. Like, we have to evaluate what we see to determine, do we think it's real or not? Whether that's news, whether it's images or video. And if we're not sure, or even if we are sure, maybe we should do our own research as well. This gone are the days, really. Well, even some people would argue these never were these days, that you could just take what you see or what you're shown as that being the truth. Some people would argue that's never been the case, but certainly now, more and more, we need to be careful of where we get our information from. We're doing this podcast, and we're not we're saying this is what we see and you're demonstrating your stuff, but we're not actually advocating what is true, what is not true. We're having a conversation to help people navigate that space, because anything that we say on here, if you want to know it for yourself, go and check it for yourself. Go and make sure that is the case. Don't just assume. Don't just digest what is sent to you.
In 6 months from the date of us recording this, the world of AI will be completely different.
Yeah, we'll have to do another recording and see how far you've got on with your movie of the book, and what you've learned from that. Because as you say, we've already spoken about, and it's really interesting. And you probably deliberately chose 6 months, because what we're seeing is, we've seen a 12-month jump, and then we're going to see a similar, if not bigger, jump in 6, and then it's going to probably be an even bigger jump in 3. The speed of advancement, because obviously now AI is being used to develop, where it's using that model of saying, right, okay, we can do this now with AI. How can we use AI to help us make AI better? But ultimately, we always need to have a human in there, because we need the human creativity to drive creativity inside of AI. If we lose human creativity, then we'll lose the AI's ability to be creative, because it's only able to be creative through us.
And it's always better with humans, isn't it, Sean?
Very good. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, Glenn. Thanks you again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.